So Mark, when did you start to think about this project, and in particular about yurt? So when and where is coming from the idea?
Okay, well, my work is quite has been quite modular, and for a long time it's been quite modular in that parts get reused and reiterated into different versions of themselves, and as a consequence the ideas grow and change and develop over time, and it's kind of all part of a kind of a certain sense of world building and building a kind of a whole collection of objects that relate to each other, and I kind of see them as sculptural entities as opposed to just sculptures. They're kind of like, they've got agency in a sense in this world that's been built for them. And the first, this current piece that we're in, this is Yurt. It's like a temple for transhumanists. But its first iteration, this is basically version 5 of a sculpture that begun in 2009 in an exhibition in the Lab in Dublin, where these radial pieces, they were stood up straight. They were standing straight, and they had 2 fluorescent bulbs, and they were kind of in a kind of an arc that went around you. So you stood into this, and it was like kind of mocking the idea of going through a transporter, like in Star Trek or something like that. And then the next room that you went into was completely dark, so you would see the after image of the lights. And then it progressed. And then following that, I created this central column and made it as a TP. So these put the feet were on it and just lent it in and created a kind of a TP like structure, and that kind of got me thinking about this idea of like nomadic movement and things arriving in place and disappearing. I was kind of thinking about it in terms of like a sort of like sort of an ethnic stargate, you know, and from there then the third version was to put in these legs, and again with all of these versions they were all fluorescent tubes, so it was kind of an analog situation, an analog piece. And following that, once I made that, that was shown in the HDLU in Zagreb, I think in 2018, and after that I worked with Cullen to create a digital model of it. So then it became something else, and having a digital model, he'd done a beautiful job of it, great verisimilitude, and it required a soundtrack. So in doing that, I was working in parallel with this other artist, Ty Kinsella, who was doing things with Palace Projects. So we decided to start collaborating together, and I was asking him to create soundtracks, and then that evolved into like doing kind of haptic work where you touch it and it triggers something else. So this piece then became, the potential for this piece as a digital work existed. There was a soundtrack, and then that kind of like snowballed into a project for Ima that got shelved. It didn't happen, but as part of it there was seed money to develop the idea to make it into a fully interactive piece. So to change it out from being fluorescent to having this digital lights. These are like LED lights, and they're all addressable at like, you know, at points the whole way along. So they're kind of like linear TV screens, you know, linear screens. And I was working with Mick Murray for that, and like I got introduced to him through a feasibility study with him, like, you know, so.
Okay, good.
So that's great, and then that kind of, that creates a reaction with possibility for an interaction with the lower belly.
As you mentioned before, the collaboration with one of Tig, in that sense he created the digital version of all these objects, and then the interaction. So from the yurt, you start from there, and then you mentioned that this installation, this work, these pieces, they are creating an interaction, and is a kind of a generative work, since when you have one, like the seed, and then is creating something else that planted into your head. And then part is coming from another important experience I feel from for you, and then we have this portrait of an artist
as a transhumanist.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed.
So
well, this kind of, it developed over a long time. It started out as a process piece. This is a piece of like infrastructure. It's a pipe, it's black plastic pipe, and I was kind of into the idea of like, transforming it into something kind of like immaterial, something kind of more precious. And I did that by really carefully laminating it with little stickers of aluminium tape. And it took like the best part of a year to do that, so it was a very slow process. And then there was bamboo rods that have been also coated in some cases insulation tape, like silage tape.
Yeah.
And also then some of them have aluminium tape over them. So this idea of like preserving is brought in to do it. So the grass is being preserved. And in some cases it's kind of like, it's almost subsumed in that it's not easy to know that it's bamboo unless you kind of look really carefully and you see the knuckles of where the stem sections grow.
But even I don't know, for me is inspired me like even like they are working as an antenna to receive signals everything from.
Well, they are for sure. Like the original Sputnik was a ball. Yeah. Like the first satellite was a ball, and it had like 4 rods that came out of it. So like 4 antennae. So it is definitely riffing off that for sure. So it's this idea that it's the portrait of an artist as a transhumanist, and the idea is that in the future, if you were to have mind emulation, as in you can run your mind on a machine, the need to have a body like what we have now is not necessary. Your body could take any form at all, and it could exist in space. It could exist anywhere. Anywhere that can run a computer, basically.
And this is coming from your experience in Arizona, if I remember correctly.
That's correct. Yeah, I went to a place called Alcor in Scottsdale, Arizona, beside Phoenix, the city of Phoenix, and it's basically an institute that cryogenically freezes bodies and heads as a service, and they keep them in these big douars, they call them. Like they're basically like these huge big cylinders of stainless steel, and they've got like these 5 feet on their own wheels. They're bigger than this because each one holds 4 kind of coffins, like these stainless steel coffins, and then there's a shelving unit to house heads, and they're like in stock pots, It's quite kind of it's quite creepy. But the idea is that the people have signed up for the service, and in the future, if it's possible, they'll get reanimated, and the chances are, if they're reanimated, they're going to be running on code,
Yeah.
So that's what they think. Some of them think that the brain will be regrown, reanimated, and they just grow a body. But others think it'll be more digital. So if it's digital, then the body can take any shape or form at all, So it's it's a bit of a parody of that,
Yeah, so it's always like, again, a dialogue between the human being and the universe and the future that we are going probably to face on this planet as transhuman body.
Yes, where our techno overlords are dragging us, with haste.
So, and again, since we met at Palace in 2017, now many years ago, we had a conversation even about the experience in Geneva, in Switzerland.
Oh yes,
that was something again that exactly addressed in a way like your work. I feel like since then, because I remember it was possibly 2009 when you visited Switzerland. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I was probably time is time flies.
Yeah, it's a while ago.
So, but anyway, from
that, it might have been 2009. Yeah. But it was very interesting to go over there.
Yeah.
I was doing the UCD Air residency at the time. It was kind of artists embedded in the University College Dublin.
So all these experiences, exactly, they were, I feel like the ground where then you start, or anyway was already in your head and part of your research already. But anyway, since then probably you progress and you arrive where
I think I kind of forked away from that sort of work. Back then I kind of like explored more the narrative content, and moved in a direction of like building this kind of this world building idea, of creating a series of characters and environments and places where they all interrelate, and like there's a story to be told in it.
And now we have the third story about this. I don't know, is it a trilogy or no? It's even more than a trilogy.
Well, there's 9 different works.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and I feel like the last one, the Nowhere Valley, is going to be something that again is a portal, or anyway is working, not a portal like the earth, but portal in a way like is going to bring you and bridge you probably to the next evolution of your work, because
perhaps,
it is something that is now creating the interaction, is animating the earth in that sense, because
it enables the whole performative element
from the Nowhere Valley, then you start the new version of the earth, that they are having this great dialogue where there is light and sound, and they are moving together, and we saw yesterday they are dancing together even with a performance. So that's very interesting to see how then the next step. But anyway, we move to the, the Nowhere Valley.
The Nowhere Valley does open up the new terrain, as you say, in terms of like it's a sculpture. Very clearly, it's a sculpture, but it's also a haptic, playable sculpture where the points, the copper. This is again is like a piece of infrastructure, like this, a pipe. This is a manhole pipe for a shaft, and again, it's been coated in copper tape in a very painstakingly slow process, but it allows it to be conductive. So as it's conductive, if I take an earth point and then press it, the sound is down. We won't hear that. Okay. Anyway.
That doesn't sound then.
We won't use that bit of audio.
Yes, after the production.
Right.
But
let me see. So as in terms of the entity, I see this as a cybernetic worm deity, and it's relating back to a Celtic worm god, Crom Cruach, who was established as a worm god by the comic book 2000 AD in a Celtic storyline called Sláine, or Sláine. And I found that quite interesting. Like, I mean, St. Patrick was supposed to have destroyed the one effigy of Crom Cruach with a sledgehammer. It was basically just a rounded mound of stone that came up out of the ground. So he was kind of like a mysterious earth deity, and to be drawn then as a worm god is quite interesting, because at the time, worms would have been considered quite repulsive, but the importance of worms is obviously has come to the fore a lot more, in terms of sustainability and environment and creating the soil that feeds us, So this is off the ground, and it's something that's kind of lateral in that worms are across the whole world. Every landscape needs them to create kind of fertility, and the idea is that we create this performance where we awaken this cybernetic deity, and then it attacks the earth. This temple of light, this idea of verticality, of vertical capital, and getting thinner and thinner and thinner and taller and taller, and more removed from the ground and society at large, and breaking free and kind of going orbital, and existing at these insane levels of efficacy as much as they would like to, colonizing Mars and going out into the galaxy, the Musk and the Bezos of the world, who want to kind of save us from ourselves, and they're thinking about all the people who haven't been born yet, so they're on this kind of messianic sort of drive, right? But it is somewhat diluted. But anyway, so this is about engaging the forces of lateral, like the ground and the grassroots, to have a kind of an attack on the temple of the earth. So there's these two forces, and this is the Nowhere Belly, and the counter force then is the earth, but that kind of is a representative of this other kind of overarching force called the Everything Vault. And the Everything Vault is this idea of technological efficacy and containing and encapsulating and recuperating, all human content for it of itself, and the idea that it would kind of permeate outwards and just continue, you know, like we're talking about cycles and cycles and cycles of time. And they're represented then by these, because I couldn't make a sculpture of that because it's too big, you know, as a concept it's too large. So it exists as avatars and as like technological temples, but then as these lino cuts that are on the walls. And they're called the seed node of the everything vault individual.
Okay.
So it's kind of like as if it's creating this grid of effect that's like enclosing the whole event. You know?
So then from the nowhere belly, it's even a creature like a Cthulhu that is coming from anyway the ground, or even from the reference that sometimes we came across, that is Donna Haraway, that anyway she is mentioning in Stay with the Trouble in the book, that in the ground there is this see the creature, but anyway there is this I don't know, entity or energy that is staying in the ground, and we have to be careful to awaken, otherwise the human species is going to disappear, because of course the planet is not going to be sustainable and for what we are doing and creating. So even
she argues for more consideration for the critters of the planet, like
exactly.
this kind of overlapping subjectivity between all different creatures, and that the boundaries between one and the other aren't defined. You know, there's bleed, and we should be aware of this, and like, you know,
exactly.
have a due consideration to more of the creatures that we share the world with.
We share the planet.
And we evolve, we co-evolve, you know.
And even the idea for me to use the filter is even something that is a natural material that is coming from, again, the planet, so, and has a very important, I don't know, meaning sometimes, because it is reminding me the Joseph Beuys and how he used the filter just to cover himself, and is again something that is connected with the ground, as you said, and how the nowhere belly is coming from the ground and attacking the humanity in a way, like that has a hope into the earth to survive. So
yeah, well, with the felt, there's two types of felts. There's like a kind of a more natural felt, like a woolen felt, but interspersed in that, it's very hard to get the just pure wool felt now.
Oh no,
certainly in Ireland. But it's interspersed with plastic all the way through it, like strands of plastic.
Yeah,
and then underneath there's layers of actually like foam, which is recycled plastic. Yeah. So it's the kind of idea, and it's laid down in layers like sedimentary rock. So that's the kind of idea. It's like referencing the idea of like the geological record and how it's laid down in layers, and how we will define, how you're able to define an epoch, like the Anthropocene, is by the geological record. And one of the indicators of the geological record is that they'll be in future digs, they'll be finding a layer of rock all around the earth that's going to be full of chicken bones and plastic.
Exactly.
Right?
The fossils, they are going to be
our production,
new fossil,
you know.
That,
and then the god Crom Cruach was also known as the god of the mound. So they had a mound, and that's why I was kind of like created this sort of like this ramp for like to reference back to that connection to Crom Cruach.
So, and anyway, even the performance is quite dramatic at a certain point when you are playing the nowhere belly, and the music and the evocation of the sound and the human voice is quite really dramatic. Just give me more insight about every, or I don't know, each or some of them, the track records that you encapsulate into this work.
Okay, yeah. Well, it started, I guess, again with that trip to Arizona. I visited the Biosphere 2, which is this huge experiment where they locked a bunch of scientists and playwrights and agriculturists into this huge greenhouse that was sealed.
Okay.
And it's in Arizona, so like the temperatures during the day are really hot, so the air expands, and at nighttime it shrinks. You know, so to prevent the glass house from exploding out, they created these two separate buildings, which were big domes with a massive concrete disc, and then connected to that was a diaphragm, a rubber diaphragm, and it was basically floating on the air that got pushed up during the day when the air expanded, and at nighttime it pushed the air back into the biosphere. So it was the two lungs of the biosphere, and so it created this lovely system of moving air throughout the day and night, you know. But I recorded my voice in that dome, creating kind of like a droning, toning sort of sound, and then we recreated that we re-recorded in a cave in Portrane with Tig. So that would be a section of notes that follow a kind of a bass pentatonic scale. So there's a pod of these rods, and each one of these is triggered, and in this case these are the stones being thrown into the cave, and they've been reiterated, and they build and they dissipate and they fall away, and then there's these notes here. These are kind of a choral piece, and it's from my wife Gillian Lawler, who's an amazing singer. She was also recorded there, and Tig again put it into a scale of 5 notes. And then there's some strings, like a string section, and then there's a horns piece, which is kind of a long developed melody that builds and builds and gets a bit discordant. And then over here then is a section of like kind of hard sort of techno-y sort of beats and samples that play over each other and in time. And then something a little bit lighter.
What is very important is even to really put a highlight on all the professionals and all the person that they are involved and got involved with this project, because there are so many expertise inside this work. It's not just an artwork, as you say, it's a playable work. You are going to have a workshop, so with an orchestra, so it's going to be like really a piece that everyone they can enjoy and play. And at the same time there are so many expertise inside about digital art, but engineer and all these professionals that they came together and they contribute to give a life to these creatures and bring them to life. So and
we had a great team. We had a great team to work with. You know. As I say, there was Tiger Curran doing the digital modeling, and then Ty Kinsella, who's the sound composer, artist, Paul Green, who did the controls for the videos that go from place to place to place, as well as a whole VR representation of the Earth, which kind of would create, that would be like the 6th version, because it's different. You know, it's another version of it. And within that space, there's interactivity. So, like if you're in the VR space, you can trigger events in the real world, which will happen on the various screens. Okay. Like the 3 locations.
But it's very good to see.
I missed out on Mick Murray who lives in Slovenia. He's the lighting expert who was creating the interaction between this piece and the Nora belly. So you can see as I press that, you get different reactions. Yeah. And that's all live.
It's incredible how this exhibition is bringing together so many persons.
And then we had the dancers as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That Tig introduced me to, because as part of his, he's in the collective Dublin Modular, so he works with a lot of different young music producers and dancers, and like, you know, across sort of platforms, you know. So it's rich. It's got depth,
exactly.
and I've always liked working with other people, you know, and then working with yourself as a curator, you know, getting the work out there, which is really good, you know.
No, it was a pleasure, and now it's a kind of a few episodes together, delivering different versions of it. Was for me. I start to have the conversation about possibly the Earth and the other stuff when at Palace. Just really at the beginning. Then during COVID it was towards super connection, so it was incredible work, modular, and it was something fresh and new, especially for that time during the COVID time. It was great to have that piece in Genoa, and then later last year in Turin again. So it's a pity that wasn't fit the space, because it is one of my favorite, because in their simplicity, it's because all of them, they are quite interesting, technological, and they are so evolute.
And of the works, that one was the one that would link most closely with the CERN ideas, you know.
Okay.
Because it's the idea of super connection, this idea that like every point in space is connected to every other point, you know. So and if you change one thing, it has a relationship somewhere else in a non-causal, non-local effect, you know. So that's some of the ideas that I was exploring for that, you know. And that was the creation. That was laminating the bamboo with the aluminium and the insulation tape.
So again, all these pieces, they are creating a constellation, they are creating their universe, and they are coexisting very well together, and as well as like this all creative and professional person, they are coexisting in this project, and it was great that anyway, with your idea, with your vision, all these people, they came on board, and we are all part now of your of your dream.
Cyborgs.
Yes, we are all now going to be a transhuman, I don't know.
Right.
Entities.
Well, we're all moving towards transhumanism.
Oh,
like,
yeah, at the end of this.
Like, for instance, you wear glasses, you know.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Now.
I'll have no problem getting a hearing aid when time comes.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's not too soon.
Okay, so.
And we're practically. This makes us transhuman as well,
this is a
because our subjectivity is like blended with the phone now.
Oh yeah, now
completely.
Yes, it could be in our
my
hand.
Watch, right?
Yeah. Oh yes.
My way of telling time. We blend with our tools, you know. But we also blend with the creatures around us. So we have to kind of think of how we exist in the world, you know. Yeah. And it's not just like this verticality, like the Earth. You know,
the verticality
out,
is always going
to let's
God.
Move to another planet after we ruin this one.
We have to ruin very well this one, and then we will move.
Yes, exactly, like, you know.